have to say he's pretty freaking awesome. Hello guys, it's Adam the Collector, and for this review we're going to be taking a look at the Demoniacal Fit Legendary Berserker action figure, aka Broly, the Legendary Super Saiyan. If you collect SH Figure Arts Dragon Ball Z figures, then the layout should look a little familiar, right down to the thin cardboard and flimsy clear plastic. Behind that, we get a pretty good look at the figure, as well as some of the faceplates and hand accessories it comes with. I'm really digging the black and red artwork of our legendary Berserker, aka Broly, with the Demoniacal Fit logo in various places, as well as a warning for small parts. Going to the back of the packaging, we get some nice product shots of Berserker Broly all posed up, showcasing super modeling and super action. On the bottom, we just get more warning than legal mumbo jumbo, and then as far as the sides and the bottom, we get more of that continued artwork of our legendary Berserker, as well as some more logos. But that's enough of the packaging. We're here to see if this Berserker is truly a legendary third-party action figure worth adding to your collection. So how about we blast this Berserker out of the box? And here we have our legendary Berserker out of packaging, and I have to say, he's pretty freaking awesome.
What do you expect from a true freak?
But as good as he looks, he's not totally perfect, and we'll get into all of that. But first, how about we take a look at the few accessories he comes with. And for starters, we get 5 additional hands, a pair of splayed, a pair of grasping, and one with a clump of Super Saiyan hair that's compatible with the Goku figure, 3 green energy blasts, a smiling and yelling faceplate, 1 display stand, a grasping claw, as well as a pair of display rods. Dragon Ball happens to be my favorite manga and anime of all time, and Broly is one of the best movie characters from the franchise. But surprisingly enough, this is my very first import quality Dragon Ball Z figure ever, and I have Calca's Toys to thank for that. So if you've been sleeping on this figure like I have, stick around and I'll show you how to get a little bit of a deal on it. But before we talk about the good, we're gonna get into one of my gripes about this figure. It has a poor center of gravity. Getting this guy to balance can be a bit tricky. He can do it if you have him in a vanilla pose, but as soon as you try to get into anything a bit more dynamic, he starts falling all over the place. And even though his joints do feel pretty sturdy, you might have a hard time getting into balance unless you have this display stand. I've already connected it with the display rod it comes with as well as his claw, and so for most of the review, I'm just gonna have it clamped around his waist. And when you do that, he'll have no problem standing up, especially if you have him in a more vanilla pose. This Broly figure has a very faithful design. Starting with his head, I love how well his face was captured. I'm really digging the reddish brown hash marks for his eyebrows, his cheeks, his mouth, and the overall outline around his eyes. And then on top of that, of course, we have the legendary Super Saiyan spiky hair. His hair is made out of a slightly softer plastic and it has a matte finish, so it absorbs light really well. We also get highlights of green in the crevices to really sell that design. And just check out how it looks from the back. It's really cool how they managed to capture that 2D artwork but put it in a 3D space. Moving on to the main body, we've got to talk about Broly's most notable feature.
Big muscles!
What I like the most is how well they managed to incorporate the articulation and the shading that we're getting to really bring those muscle details out. You can see it in his shoulders, his biceps, his triceps. And then moving on to his chest, he's got a pair of Dragon Ball Z's. And you can see them just rippling with power. Again, just like the rest of his body, we get that subtle wash of a darker tan to really bring him out. Below that, we get washboard abs with generous shading on them to help bring out the details. Moving on, I really like the look of Broly's wristbands. It looks like they're molded in a gold plastic, but we have a gradient or at least some dry brushing of a darker gold color to really bring out the details. I also love the blue gem that we have in the center. It looks just like what we saw in the film, and not only can that same detail be found on his other arm, but it's also found on the necklace he's wearing too. I always like the regal nature of Broly's aesthetic, and it adds to his legendary status. Moving on to his lower half, we get more of that golden blue armor aesthetic on his red waist cloak, which stands out very nicely, and then I love the folded fabric details that they managed to sculpt into that cloak. I also appreciate the darker dry brushing that we're getting on all of the folds to really bring out the details, and my favorite part would have to be the fact that everything here seems to be articulated. We have a series of ball joints and hinges attached to various portions of the waist cloak, so as you saw earlier in the video, you can articulate these to kind of show Broly powering up if you wanted. And just like his red cloak, I love that we're getting dry brushing in the folds of his pants. This time it's a grayish blue color, and it really does a lot to highlight this figure. They look very comfortable and baggy, which is pretty much the case for all Dragon Ball Z characters. That sculpt is broken up by the articulation scheme that they have here, but it does allow Broly to get some really deep poses, and when you do bend his legs, I do like how they continue that sculpt. So despite the ugliness in the back, it really does give it a natural bend in the front. Finally, getting down to his lower legs, we get these gold boots, the same color as the armbands that we got, complete with that blue gem in the center, and then some red details as we get to the bottom of his boots. I like that they're tipped with gold as well. Now, we already talked a little bit about the articulation in his legs, but his upper body can move just as well. Despite the size of his arms, they can move incredibly well, aided by the swivel hinge at the shoulder, and then we also get a ball joint where his shoulders meet his chest. It gives him a surprising range of motion, and it all feels very fluid. The same is true with his elbow joint. Again, not very aesthetically pleasing, but when you go to bend it, check that out. I like how the elbow sculpt continues from the inside of these hollow forearms and biceps to give the illusion that his skin is stretching as his arm bends. It could have been done a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, but the results are pretty nice. We have the same concept going for Broly's back as well. Just check that out. When you go to bend it, look how that back sculpt continues. Going back to the front, Broly has a simple ball joint in his neck. He won't be doing too much looking up, but he can look from side to side pretty organically. Unless you combine it with the articulation that we're getting in his chest, it has a ball joint which kind of simulates a rocker. You can kind of tilt upwards. And look at that. Despite his size and his spiky hair, Broly does a decent job of looking upward while maintaining the sculpt, though it is gappy in a few areas. He has the slight ball joint at his waist, and you can combine it with the swivel that we're also getting just below that. And because of that articulated cloak I mentioned, not only can you simulate Broly powering up, but it can get out of the way so that you can utilize his leg articulation. He just has ball joints at his hips, aided by a slight drop down joint, so his legs can get a little bit past 90. Again, we already mentioned that impressive knee joint. And then as for his ankles, we get a little bit of a hinge, no real rocker, but we do get some articulated toes. So despite Broly's brutish size, with all of his articulation, you can still get him in some pretty dynamic and convincing poses. Like this battle stance that I have here.
He's the one, the Saiyan of legend.
But if you like that, he gets even better when we hook him up with a few of the accessories that he comes with. Like this pair of faceplates, for example. I love the grimace that we're getting with this one, true to Broly's nature, but I think I like this yelling one even more. I really like how well this expression captures Broly's psychotic attitude, and if you look at it carefully, it looks like he's happy when you're looking at it straight on, but if you tilt it ever so slightly, it looks like he's more angry. And they'll swap out easily enough thanks to these pegs in the back. And to make that happen, all we have to do is remove Broly's hairpiece, and then
take his face off.
Reattach his hairpiece. And fits in pretty seamlessly with the rest of its head sculpt. You can barely tell it's removable. I'm really digging the confidence of that face sculpt. But again, as I said earlier, I think I'm gonna like that angry face sculpt a little bit more. Yep, I gotta admit, this one just screams Broly, no pun intended. Especially for his more expressive poses, like the ones we'll get when we swap out his hands. We get a splayed out open pair like this, and then another pair of style pose hands. And thanks to the ball joints in Broly's wrists, they'll be able to swap out easily enough. And what I like the most about these hands is the amount of range they have. Even though they're on ball joints, look how deep we can get that. That's a crazy amount of rotation that we're getting on that ball joint, and the same is true for more style pose hands. Broly definitely looks like he's getting ready to spam some energy blasts. But if you're not a fan of using special effects like I do, you do have the option of using these green spiky energy blasts that Broly comes with. They're just made out of a translucent green plastic. They do have a little bit of paint on the front end. He does come with about 3 of them, so if you wanted, you could place it in his hand like so. He holds it pretty decently, or you could use these other 2 that he comes with and attach them to this posing rod here. All you have to do is remove the clamp. And then you'll notice that each of these energy blasts have peg holes on the bottom. So once we remove that clamp, they can actually peg right in. And then we can articulate it any which way we want. Very nice. It also comes with a second posing rod that we can attach to this key blast. And then you'll notice here that these spaces are filled in, but all we have to do is use the larger end of this posing rod to kind of unplug those pegs. Just make sure you don't lose these pieces. But once you do all that, now you have 2 different energy blasts you can pose around. And with a little bit of patience, you can find other fun ways of posing Broly, spamming some energy blasts. We also get an additional hand with the clump of Goku's Super Saiyan hair. It's made to be compatible with other SH Figuarts figures like Super Saiyan Goku, so you can replicate Broly holding him by his head. But unfortunately, I don't own any other Dragon Ball Z SH Figure Arts figures, so this looks a little bit silly. However, for this review, I did pick up a Dragon Star Super Saiyan 2 Goku by Bandai America. And yikes, Broly's not only in a league of his own in terms of power, but in detail as well. I mean, look at the quality difference between these two figures.
A true piece of trash.
However, let's see how well we can replicate the pose on the back of the box with this Dragon Stars Goku. Yeah, he's not exactly holding up the Dragon Stars Goku by his hair, his hands are mostly around his neck, but it does get the point mostly across, right? Not bad at all. And on that note, how about we move on to a size comparison? Broly stands about 8 inches tall to the top of his spiky hair, and because of his dense size, he's gonna absolutely dwarf other 6-inch scaled action figures like the Power Rangers Lightning Collection Zeo Rangers by Hasbro. He's taller than most standard and mid-sized Marvel Legends Avengers figures, but Broly is gonna be about the same size as a deluxe Hulk. He's literally head and shoulders above various figures in the G.I. Joe Classified line, and he's gonna be slightly taller than the 7-inch McFarlane Toys Justice League line. He's not nearly as dense, but he's about the same size as Gridiron Studios' upgraded Flight Pod Mech and Coil Armor upgrade set. And here's how he looks flanked next to a couple of Robo Skulls by Skeletron. No way he's fitting inside those. He's gonna be taller than most Legion builders in the Cosmic Legions line by 4 Horsemen Studios, and he's about the same size as most standard Predators from across NECA's Predator line. And while he's nearly twice the size as NECA's Cartoon Ninja Turtles, he's still a bit on the shorter side when compared to the larger figures from that same line. And finally, here's how Berserker Broly looks under black light. Even with all that power, no effect. So as for my final thoughts, the Demoniacal Fit Legendary Berserker, aka Broly, is a pretty good figure. And while it is light on accessories, it still comes with the essentials. My only real complaints are that this figure has a terrible center of gravity, so getting him to stand or pose around in interesting ways was pretty difficult unless you have that display stand attached to it. And while the articulation is innovative, sometimes the cuts can be a bit excessive or distracting. But all in all, if you can look past that, Broly is definitely a figure worth adding to your collection. So if you actually want this figure for yourself, it'll set you back about 83 bucks, a lot cheaper than the official SH Figure Arts Broly goes for these days. And for those interested, I actually have a link in the description where you can buy it from Kalki's Toys. Just use my promo code and you'll get a little bit off your next purchase. But whether or not you choose to add this figure to your collection, I hope at the very least you enjoyed this review. Thank you guys so much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and share my video if you think others might find it useful or entertaining. It helps out more than you know. Be sure to stick around for a gallery at the end. And as always, collect responsibly.